When I talk to journalists, I always get one question. And you've probably heard that as well. It's who's going to survive? Is it the insurtechs or is it the incumbents? Who will be there in 5 years, 10 years? Who will be the winner of this battle? And I have two things to say to that. First of all, I think it's the fundamentally wrong question. And second of all, the answer to it is none. None of us will survive the way we are today. Not the fintechs, not the insurer. I'm a biochemist, so my original background is in cancer research. And there is one fundamental law of nature. You either change or you die. Full stop. Sooner or later. Any species that does not involve, by the way, including the human race, will vanish, go, or it will change. It will become something new. So the question is not, are we going to survive or are they going to survive? The question is, what can we learn from each other? What concepts do work? What concepts don't work? So that any organization will survive. By the way, do you have an idea how long companies stay alive? Think about it. On average. 15 years, not too bad. The average is around 10 years. And it doesn't matter in what industry or what country or the size you have. Your average chance of surviving is 10 years, full stop. There is a little bit of disbalance. If you take the startup scene, your chances, if you're working with a startup, who's working with a startup? Okay, your chances of survival the next 10 years is 1 to 1,000. Sorry to say. Roundabout. Who's working for an incumbent, for a big one? Your chances are around 10 years. So not much better, 50%. So for example, if you take the Fortune 500, in the last 12 years, nearly half of the Fortune 500 companies have disappeared from the shadow of the earth. If you ask people like Google, what do they fear? To be gone. Because people like me, old guys, remember there was a search machine called Alta Vista, which was as big as Google is today. Gone. Not really important anymore. Same for the insurance industry. What makes insurtechs and insurers special is that probably the most extreme sides of business come together. Insurance industry is 400 years old. You can go out there, see any of the industries, even if the incumbents, none is 400 years old. None. Insurance is basically the same for 400 years. We do exactly the same business. If you go to Lloyd's to London, they insure ships today the exact same way they have insured ships in 1650. It's the exact same business. They use computers instead of blocks, but the basic calculation, the basic way of doing business is the same. And then we have startups that have 400 days of existence. So how do we actually bring those together? What can we learn from each other? And if you look about, I would like to talk about three things on both sides. On the side of startups, main asset, agility. The agility is the way to work in a digital environment. There's a lot of tools around it, lots of buzzwords, but in the way, it's the way here you manage fast and rapid change. Then they have a second thing, which is called customer focus. Most startups start with a real customer problem. Something incumbents tend to forget once they're in business for 50 years, that they actually started once with a real customer problem. And the third thing, and it's very important, and I don't mean that negative, is they're wonderfully naive in what they do. Most of the insurtechs I see, and I've seen lots of them in my role, are so 100% naive about doing business that they actually come up with wonderful new solutions. So what do we have on the other side? On the other side, you have an industry that runs a business for 400 years, which means we know processes. We know how to run a thing. We know what to do to achieve a result. Very important skill. Second of all, we have resources. Financially one, but the most important resources we have is the opposite to the customer orientation, is we have customers. I always tell people when they ask me, what do you do? I say, I run Germany's biggest fintech, which is Cosmos Direct. The biggest fintech in Germany round have something like, or InsurTech, they have like 80,000 customers acquired in 3 years. That's a good production week of Cosmos Direct. We're far away. We can test something out with 50, 100,000 customers, which is impossible if you ruin your old customer base. So that's something we can bring to the table. And the third one is the exact opposite of the naivety, is our critical mind. And critical mind is a nice word for insurers always start with a problem. So once you come up with an idea in an insurance company, first thing is, yeah, but can't do this, regulation, blah, 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 all that stuff. So how do you combine that? And this is my third wave of companies to involve. I've experienced as a biochemist the biotech startup phase. You remember 90s something, some of you? I have experienced the dot-com bubble in both bringing companies to the stock market. And I see my third one yet. And my takeaway, and that's the fundamental difference, and that's the thing you should remember if you forget everything else I've said today, is we work together in the wrong way. It's on the one side, startups always tell me, yeah, we'll bring you out of the market. We're the new ones. We're one of the great ideas, and you'll be gone out of business in 10 years. Bullshit. Sorry. The second one is board colleagues like in my board say like, we want to be as agile and wonderful as these young guys are, so let's buy one. And guess what? The moment we've bought it, we've destroyed it. We can't run it. Insurance can't run startups. It's impossible. It's not in our DNA. So you might question me, what do you think how we can cooperate? So what we've come up with in the last years is the way of creating ecosystems. Ecosystems for customers. Maybe as I come from biology, in an ecosystem, there are different niches and different roles of different species that actually work together, creating an environment. It's like, the elephant talking to the ape, I want to climb trees like you. It doesn't work. And if the ape tries to do things the elephant wants to do, it doesn't work as well. But together, they create a stable ecosystem, bringing in the skills. But you have to change some fundamental thoughts you think about the world before you do that. Because the first thing is, you have to change the introductory question. It's not about, are you going to survive or am I going to survive? If you start with a question, it's me, either you or me, you're out of the equation. It's us both. And the question is, how can we both work together that each of the system actually generates more than 100%? There is the other strategy as well. I was having a small talk with one of the other guys who's actually running something into health. And there is the other way where big companies say, no, we don't want to play that game. It's called the Pharmaceutical Game. We generate all these wonderful biotech startups, and before they go big, we buy them, end of story. It's also a strategy. But actually that strategy for us in insurance doesn't work because we can't run technology. We don't understand technology. It's not something we do. And if you're honest, most of the startups you see are not really financial institutions in that sense, because they don't do anything new to the way financial institutions work. They're actually technology companies. They run technology in a different way. They use technology in a different way. But they don't change the fundamental laws of financial institutions. At least for insurance, I can 100% say that. There is not a new idea on fundamentally changing insurance. By the way, the only new idea comes actually from the big ones, because they're the only one who go into the risk of insurance. So if there is one thing that will change in the next 10 years in insurance, it's the notion of risk itself. For 400 years, something happened, we pay. But now we're into the world of Minority Report. You know the film? So we can actually do something before it happens. And that's the first fundamental change in 400 years. Forget about all the wonderful tech stuff around it. That is not really changing the world. What is really changing is do something about the risk before it occurs. But we as an insurer can't manage that technology. We can't manage robotics. We can't manage sensoric. We can't manage big data really. We understand data very well. That's what we do for 400 years. But looking backwards. But we're not really good in managing actual real-time data. So we need this ecosystem of people around us that do exactly that. And as I said, we're not trying to buy them and integrate them into our business model, because it doesn't work. All this wonderful, you buy this wonderful small startup company, you want to be happy and it has to run, and then you come with 510 corporate rules which they should apply. End of story. Doesn't work. Good guys run away, nobody complies to it, forget about it. So how do we manage to create this space around the customer where we're actually providing one part and several others are providing other things? You can see that up and running in what we have, the program and the product called Vitality, where we actually manage health of people, and combined with that, life insurance, health insurance, term life, all different products. That's what we supply. A company called Vitality is managing the ecosystem, and several suppliers from startups, from big incumbents, are actually giving into that system services which they can provide. So it's different from we're in control to we're part of an ecosystem. We're part of the whole value chain that is actually created. It's not the question anymore, do we survive or they survive? It's a question of, do we together come up to the next stage? And that's a fundamental change in how you manage the relationship between big companies and startup companies. Doesn't mean it will succeed, but as I said, I've seen the other approaches fail too often, and we believe very strongly that we're actually, by this, generating much more customer value than we can before, as we can on our own or integrated with other things. So what else has to change then? As I said, it's not about us or them. It means we have to find a new equation of equality in that type of game. And that's very strange for us as well, because we're used to, all financial institutions are used to, whatever we do, we're in the driver's seat. We're in control. We're superior to the suppliers. By the way, same problem is true for the automotive industry. The problem is also you lose a part of control. And that's extremely frightening for an insurer. You can't control an ecosystem with different companies, different players, the way you can control an insurance company. highly regulated. I mean, we're all trained in that for decades, you know, with all the reports, everything we keep in very, very, very tight control. And we have to get rid of that, and that's culturally extremely hard. So if you ask me what's the biggest problem we have, is actually the culture of management in that type of industries. So when we have to change something first, it's the way we work. We had a huge discussion actually last week in the board of Generali that it's actually us that has to change first. From the incumbents, how many times have you heard a manager say, I wish my company or my people would be more agile? It's what I meet everywhere I go. And again, that's the wrong question. If you start an idea with a wrong question, you will come up with the wrong answer. The question is not, how do my people get more agile? The question is, how do I get more agile? How can I work in an environment where I can't control everything? Where I'm not in the driver's seat, where it's not about us on top or them on top, but it's actually about getting an equilibrium, and that's why I like the word ecosystem, like in an ecosystem. Ecosystems work because they equilibrate the forces of hunters and prey and all these different things, of resources, of information, of all that stuff. And it's a different way of managing. It's not maximizing, it's keeping an equilibrium. And this has totally different skills from what we normally, what I have learned in business school in the 90s, where wonderful people like Porter and stuff were telling us, you know, you have to maximize this and that and so on and so forth. It doesn't work. Managing equilibrium is a total different way of managing. And I personally believe this is where we're going to. So although I still have 1 minute left, I would like to end it here. So if you forget everything else, just remember, it's not about us or them, it's about us together. And the change doesn't have to happen on the other side, it has to happen within you. Those are the two only things you should take away. Thank you very much.
There must be a few questions that you have after this wonderful, engaging speech for almost 20 minutes. It's on top of mind, no slides, just walking around and telling this is how it's being done. Questions? We have a microphone over here. I can walk up to you. Yes, please.
David, thanks for a very nice speech. It was really inspiring. My question is, how do you really do it? How do you create the ecosystem? Is it a sort of incubator, or how do you do it?
Okay. It's a very good question, because it also comes down to the basic idea that you have to know before, and you have to have a system that works. That's another typical management think and way of approach. First answer would be, the scientific answer is you have to experiment. We do more or less all the time. We engage in a hub where we do things together. We engage with different startups. So with some we just exchange ideas. With some we build up real problem. For me, I've experienced years ago one thing at a different insurance company, where we had a presentation about starting up new ideas of business. And we started up 10 new ideas of business. And I was saying, well, if 3 of them work, great. The CEO got totally nuts at me. He said, and I will always remember that sentence, we never start something where we know it will fail. I think it's a wrong approach. It's not that way. We can't control. If anybody in this room can tell me how the world will look in 10 years, Wonderful, highly welcome, come to me, we'll get extremely rich. We don't know. The smartphone is 10 years old as of today. If anybody could have imagined what the smartphone has done to this world, hey, welcome, be my guest. So if you don't know how the world will look in 5 years, how can you possibly think of one system that actually works in that? So you have to try out things we do naturally as human beings when we're small. And it's actually then we have education, which brings us up to the point where we don't experiment anymore. Does anybody know I don't know the English word, Büroklammer test? If you ask small children, what can you do with these small metal things to put paper together, they come up with 2,000 possibilities. When they're in elementary school, it's 500. Once they've made their A level, it's around 50. When they're through university, there's one result, and it's at the end. We fundamentally take away the possibility of human beings by thinking that the world has one answer. It's wrong. It hasn't. It had lots of answers. So that would be my approach to things. It doesn't really work in a boardroom, though.
Okay, well, that's a very nice end of your talk. No, I want to thank you thoroughly for this magic moment. Thank you so much.